Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems Author podcast, in which Craig Tuch, myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry we're in of writing and publishing. And talking about leading, we are right on the bleeding edge of writing and technology today with our very special guest, Dan Curran. Dan, how are you doing today? You are the co-founder of Chapters.io and here to talk to us all about the latest things going on and writing and publishing. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing and honored to be here. So thank you.
Oh, well, we are honored to have you. And I love it when people say they're doing amazing. It's like normally, oh, I'm doing all right. You know, I'm not dead yet. I'm still kicking or something. So excellent. Dan is doing amazing. So that is a tough act to follow. Craig, how are you doing today? Are you also doing amazing?
Well, I'm not dead yet, right? So that's a very British term. I feel like I've heard that in like some British shows or something like that. That common answer to. I don't think I personally have heard it from my friends, but I feel like I've heard it in various British sitcoms. Oh, I'm not dead yet. You know?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, Dan. Yeah. Listen, I want to hear a little bit about Chapters.io. I mean, I know it's well, just from the title, just from the name of it, Chapters.io. We know it's about writing and publishing, right? So, and I also know that you guys do a lot in the AI space. So why don't you tell us a bit about that, and then we'll jump into what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so the company name, obviously there's a couple of ways you can look at it, but it's truly, and I think it's worth mentioning here, it's chapters in your life, basically. And I think that kind of anchors us to what we're trying to accomplish. Quick background, serial entrepreneur, wannabe editor my whole life. I'm an editor fanboy, so to speak. I'm okay, but I love hanging with editors, love writers and any type of publishing professional, but especially editing. And mostly came up and built companies in the marketing space, really niche around content marketing. So we've always been interviewing people, kind of a journalistic approach for a decade or more. And about a year and a half ago, well, about November of 2020, we had 100 plus writers, and we had a dozen editors, and life's good. And then this thing called ChatGPT was launched. And if you go back to November and December and January, February of 23, I was like scratching my head saying, okay, well, this is going to be something. I don't know what it's going to be, but I have a lot of writers. So what are we going to do? Long story short, we couldn't, plagiarize. We're interviewing people. So that wasn't an option. And we didn't have a lot of time because we're, interviewing people and we got to get blogs, white papers out. But we thought, how could we use AI in a different way? So that led me through a year or two of R&D to create Chapters. And here we are. And so we kind of shedded part of that company and really hyper focusing on the nonfiction space, but, hope to get into, many facets of publishing in the months and years to come. But that's how I got to Chapters, is using AI as I guess, co-pilot, and still keeping editorial rigor and integrity. So we're helping people write their, manuscripts in the nonfiction space.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So what is Chapters.io actually doing right now? So you're helping authors write their books?
Yeah. So even to, take it away from Chapters, as any entrepreneur out there, you have success and then you have, you bump your head constantly. But these problems to solve kind of find you. So over the years, I had worked with helping some people in nonfiction publishing, both manuscript writing, marketing, publishing, et cetera. And I think it's just very, very confusing. The publishing industry is just someone kind of from marketing, just looking, over the fence. I thought it was confusing, intimidating as heck. And I also thought there were a lot of smart people in publishing, be it traditional publishers, be it hybrid publishers. But the smartest people I knew, my neighbor, my uncle, a mentor, had never written a book. They'd never heard of any of the publishing companies. They're just busy, busy building their business or being a doctor or, whatever their job is. And I thought that was a shame. And I thought with what I was learning and kind of how we looked at the world, that we could remove that stress of writing a book. I also knew AI came out without any, instructional manual. So we all have been, even to today. So it's a black box, right? It's just a big effing black box that everyone has their own, pontificates or scared or excited. And so we decided to just hyper focus on nonfiction, swim lane, and just help those, not the people who've already figured out how to navigate the publishing space, but what about the next 2 to 5% of the people that really would like to, but are confused. And so that's our mission at Chapters, is just to remove the stress of writing a book. We want to keep the editorial integrity and attribution, all those things that are very important. But how do we use AI? And I knew we would get some, bruises and cuts along the way from traditionalists, but that's okay. I want to be an ambassador. We want to be ambassadors to say, hey, there is another way to write your book, and you can use this technology to help.
Okay, so you're basically helping people in the business space who haven't written a book yet, because writing in the nonfiction business space is often a really good way to expand your reach and to reach, become a speaker and do all sorts of different events. It's always great to have that book on your resume, so to say.
Yep.
And a lot of those people, I know, traditionally, a lot of big business names that have written books, they use ghostwriters. They don't necessarily do it themselves for a variety of reasons, time and not knowing the process or whatever, right? So what you've done, it sounds like, is you've built this company to help those people to write and publish that first book. So what level is AI a part of that process?
So it probably didn't answer your question before. So how do we do what we do? So if you are a great writer, and have fine motor skills and have time and, pot of coffee or bottle of scotch and, want to write, then you go ahead and do that. Then, we want to keep that sacred, right? That's amazing. But for the rest of us, ADHD, no fine motor skills, no time, or imposter syndrome, is there another way to get from your brain, your wisdom, your knowledge, life experiences, on paper, so to speak? And it's quite simple. Overall, it's just, we can record you. So as in the last decade, transcription services and recording like Otter or Fireflies, these type of services, kind of that's what we've done. We've trained the model through human interviews. So we'll have a best-selling editor interview the client, and everything's being recorded. And we've trained the large language model to organize that content, their words, authentic to them, but just organized. So nothing even that fancy, just organized in a story arc. And then it makes recommendations or find gaps. So it works as editors love it, because it's kind of, again, a co-pilot. So as they go through a 10 to 14 week process, conversations, they are being recorded the whole time. And that is the following week, when they meet again, they're reviewing what they discussed the week before. So it's an iterative process. It's really front loaded, because we can get to a book summary and outline pretty quick. And then they go through this process of a lot of conversation. So we're not saying, if you're Thoreau or, some gifted writer, that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. We're really trying to capture wisdom that would be otherwise lost. That's kind of half of how that process works. The other half is when a lot of our clients have a lot of thought leadership already, blogs, white papers, podcasts like this. So if it's applicable, we'll also throw that in the large language model. So it's a vessel, and that vessel organizes it. And, we work with ghostwriters and love ghostwriters, but I don't know, is that pure the author, or is that the ghostwriter? Ours is pure the author. This is the author's words. We're just, all AI does is organize, find gaps, and make suggestions. But the author, it's all their own words, and we hold that, very serious. And then the editor is really the X factor. The editor is really, a special person, a dev editor in this case, to really find the magic and to really encourage the writer to be authentic and transparent and really, pull down the walls and just share their wisdom.
I find that absolutely fascinating. I worked for a very hot minute for a company down in Austin, Texas called Scribe, who their idea was they helped people and professionals write a nonfiction book to help with whatever industry they're in. And the company imploded rather dramatically. But one of the things when I very briefly worked with them was they had this like Bible of like, this is how you structure a nonfiction book. And I thought it was brilliant. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're using the power of AI to do. It's like to listen to whoever it is, dump out their thoughts and their knowledge and experience and stuff, and then structure it into what makes a good nonfiction book. And I think that's vital. I think structure is the skeleton of any book, fiction or nonfiction, but I think it works especially well in nonfiction. And so that's kind of an exciting thing. And it's one of those things where I can see the real positive of using AI. So many people are like, AI is evil, you get AI out of it. As you said, you're not relying on AI to do the writing, you're relying on AI to do the structuring. And the structuring is so often the roadblock that people have towards writing a book. They're like, I know I want to write a book. I know vaguely the concept of what I want to say. I don't know how to put it there. And it's like, this helps.
Yeah, I mean, you said it absolutely. And by the way, all of our lead flow comes from companies like Scribe, not Scribe in particular, and they've have a new management team, and I know all these people are smart. They're all I know they had their issues, but there's many others, and but we came into it as it's almost good to come in. It is good to come in and kind of be dumb about some situation, because we came in, parachuted into the publishing industry and say, you're doing stuff great, but this can be a lot easier. So, and to your point, yeah, let's immediately take off the table. Plagiarism is not acceptable, right? And attribution is required. So, okay, if that's the rules. You're telling me AI can't help in 100 other areas? Yeah, of course it can. So it's a re-engagement of how it's a revisioning of how you engage technology. And again, a heartburn that people have, I get it, but that train has left, and everyone better, get used to it. And the only reason why we're here and maybe others aren't is, quite frankly, just a head start. It takes thousands of hours to train these large language models to not plagiarize, to ask questions, to find gaps. So that's why we spent that 9 months doing that before we got here, and it seems to be working. So we're saying all those companies, if you want to, ghostwriter, if you want to get an agent, whatever you want to do, you do it. But there's a lot of people that have never heard of Penguin Books or Scribe or any of these companies, and they're pretty darn smart. How do we capture that knowledge?
Yeah, it is a fascinating way to sort of bridge that gap between, the concern that a lot of authors have of AI, people just using AI to just write a book from scratch, where you just be like, okay, write me a fantasy novel, right? And we know that the quality of the writing is not very good when you do that, and there's a lot of issues, that being one. But in this case, it sounds like it's a much different thing, especially when you're doing weeks of interviews with the person, and then just having the AI sort of use their words and their thoughts to sort of bring that all together into sort of a book format, and then you heavily relying on a dev editor as well to sort of clean it up and make sure that it's still original work, and it's still using the things that were discussed and all that stuff. I think that that's a really, really interesting way to satisfy some of the complaints that people have about having AI doing the writing, because in this case, it's not really doing the writing, but it's pulling it together.
Yeah. Yes, and for me to pontificate a little bit on that last thing you said, is when people complain, I mean, it's not like I can change the world, but like, don't complain. Like, the marketplace will take, if it's crappy writing, that'll take care of itself. I mean, people are gonna use ChatGPT, and we see it every day, and it's awful, but I think we're all getting a muscle built that we kind of move on from that, and we'll move on from those platforms that have that, and it is what that kind of takes care of itself. Good writing, a good story, how it felt when you hugged your grandmother, all those kind of, like,
Right, but I think that there,
it's all going to be, it's all authentic.
A lot of the complaints aren't only about sort of the poor writing. It's also about, the fact that it was trained to be a writer off of the backs of other writers, off of IP infringement, which comes about from the fact that it has made copies of copywritten work. That's the crux of a lot of the lawsuits against them, where although we could say, hey, we as writers, we all studied other writers, and that's how we became good writers, right? And you could say, well, what's the difference if AI was created that way? And then, the argument is more of a legal fine point of, well, to do that, it has to make a copy of that stuff to put it into, it has a copy to put it into its database, and that copying is infringing, right? So there are issues, but it sounds like what you're doing sort of is sort of getting around that anyways, because it's not even pulling from other works so much. It's pulling from specifically what this person is saying in their interviews, and it's not like building this out necessarily off of the backs of the other writers as much as in the other cases where.
Yeah, it's basically the rules. I've never seen that Scribe book you mentioned, Roland, but basically that's what the rules are. It's just rules on a story arc and chapter structure and so forth. So those are the rules, first person, second person, consistency, just really 101. But I'll introduce this term now. All the IP is in a vessel that doesn't know the rest of the world. So it's your vessel.
Right.
But to your point, Craig, though, I think that's valid, and obviously society and all of us are wrestling with the IP and who owns it, and you were very articulate in how you laid that out. We too are advocates of that, and I don't know where it's going, and I know there's some organizations that are really working hard to protect the authors right now. And so we're trying to get ahead of it in our little space by saying it's in that vessel. We hope you can monetize that IP and get paid for if you have a certain process and people learn from it. So we hope we can plug in this kind of brain of yours, the second digital twin that you have as an author, for you to be able to monetize it. I definitely think conceivably that could very well happen. So we're a big proponent of in music, rappers started sampling music decades ago, and the artists got paid for it, and it's the same thing. So if you get sampled, so I totally agree. It's your IP. You came up, is your life experience or process you put in a nonfiction book. You should get paid for it.
So one of the big sort of legal issues that around AI and writing that I know is out there is that whole idea of, if something was created by AI, it can't be copywritten. So what are your thoughts around that, and how, is it because, you're basically taking the writer's words, and you're also basically doing this heavy sort of rewrite with your dev editor as well, and so that ends up with a result that wasn't really written by AI at all, so it can be copyrighted? Is that how your thinking is on this?
Yeah, to speak about the content of what you just said, it's better if I just talk about the context. And the context is, it's a stew. It's of a lot of, even when I was on Word document and it helped finish my sentence or give me another word to use. I mean, there's also AI seeping in, in the shadows and then the editor's influence, and the editor could very well, any editor could say, why don't you say it like this? Okay, I'll say it like that. It wasn't your words, it was the editor's words. So I think I don't know how to legislate that or, cover it legally, but I do know that to be honest and to not allow our models to use the outside AI world is where we're going to plant our flag. But I also want to say that the other real mic drop on all of this is, instead of that manuscript, let's say it's a 55,000 word manuscript, and it's like we have a doctor right now who is a pretty noted oncologist, breast cancer doctor, and she sadly got breast cancer herself. So you can imagine the story she has and all the facts, and she's a scientist herself. So she's, it's just, we just let her flow and let her talk. And, it's been a privilege to capture her story, but she hopes to, evangelize this topic and her story once it's done, and speaking and curriculum and coaching and other doctors. So that manuscript, instead of sitting in a Word doc or Google Doc, it now sits in a large language model, what we call a living library, where she can go back and say, okay, I'm giving a speech to this certain kind of medical group, structure chapter 4, 7, and 8 into my speech that I'm giving next week, or give me social media content. So that vessel, that living library is just, again, I think whether it'll be us or other companies, it'll be a godsend. It'll be more user-friendly. You can get more out of that IP that you created than you ever imagined. And, again, we're months or years away from really seeing this, adopted at a big scale, but there's so many possibilities if we move beyond just ChatGPT writing an email for yourself. AI can do a lot of other things.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I think of it a bit like Notebook LM, Google's product, where you can pull in all of your disparate notes and data and then be able to sort of discuss it holistically in its own silo of, this is all the information that the AI has access to. This is all of what it's going to talk about. So if you were a writer and you have or if you want to be want to write a book, but so far all I have are notes and pieces here and there and some websites that refer to things about it and some YouTube videos. You pull all that in, and then you can sort of discuss with the AI in sort of the same sort of way that it sounds like you've built, where you're able to do things with all of that IP that you've given, and only that IP that you've given.
I think Notebook, that's a great, maybe not the best term, but kind of canary in the coal mine, or one of the first examples where you're like, wow, that's different. That's something. So I think that's a great analogy. I will steal on what someone said on AI. It's a different way of interacting with technology. And that's the best way I can describe. It's growing. It's not being built. It's growing. And we're all holding on, to our seatbelts right now. But I think when I saw Google, Notebook, I thought, that feels, it's still awkward. It's still a bit clumsy, but that's probably where it's going, right?
Right. So I know that you have a lot of feelings too about authors and their IP and what they can do with that IP beyond sort of just the book sale. So why don't we talk a bit about that? Because I know that's something that I think is really relevant to the people that you would work with for sure, but other authors as well, where you think that, okay, well, I have this book and I've sold X amount of copies on it, and maybe that's all I'm ever going to do with it. But there are other ways of monetizing it, and that's why it's important to hold on to your IP, right? So, what are your thoughts around that?
And I need to memorize these numbers, and tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe you have different data, but nonfiction business books sell very few copies, period. I think the average, and I think they're putting the thumb on the scale, is like 2,000 copies. So, if you're Elon Musk or someone write a book, or back to Steve Jobs or something, so sell millions of copies. But your rank and file, even your billionaire next that writes a book, they're not selling tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of copies. It's Seth Godin had a blog recently. It's like less than 0.05% or something like that. However, and there's another great study that came out recently that, and I know this anecdotally to be true, anyone that writes a book, it's like over 60%, I think, are so happy they wrote the book. They get an ROI from the book. It's just not from book sales. So this is quantifiable fact there. And I'm just talking about nonfiction, like how-to type books or business. So if you agree, or if that is fact, I think the big number there is this overwhelming majority that are so happy they wrote the book. And the reason why they're happy, one, is probably a sense of accomplishment, like you got your airline pilot license or something, like I did something, I felt good about myself. But I think the other one is and it says in the study that they made money off of it. And so that's how you have to look at it generally, not saying for everyone, but generally. And so what we have seen, and this is kind of a gift that just fell from the sky to give you an analogy, and this is maybe a little bit extreme, but we are working with someone that wrote a book, and we're helping them with their second book. The first book sold 3,000, happened to sell about 3,000 copies, and he did most of the selling. It was through a traditional big name publisher. And so he thought the relationship was fine. They did most of what they promised, but it only sold 3,000 copies. But he made more money on selling the movie rights. It was a biography on someone fairly famous, kind of niche in the fashion industry. So there's an example where that book is the gift that keeps on giving. And it doesn't have to be a movie rights. It could be consulting gigs you get, or a following on your newsletter and content that you're pulling from, the book. You can keep, resurfacing, excerpts from the book and for your newsletter content, et cetera. So, the term is called atomization. So I think there's just a world of possibilities. And then when you overlap that with IP, that maybe you'll get paid for just your book being in existence at some point. There's just it kind of, spider webs out to the possibilities. But the big number, hate to repeat myself, is that a vast majority of people are so happy that they wrote their book. But very few are happy that they sold millions of copies, because that is just a myth that happens, every so often.
I mean, I think if you want to be an author, then obviously your career is based on how many copies of books you sell. But if you are doing something else, then it is such a powerful tool. I mean, if you're in real estate and you've written a book about real estate, then you can when you meet a customer or a client, look at my book about real estate, and it gives you so much credibility, and it's such a great lead magnet that it almost doesn't matter that you don't sell millions of copies. You've just got it.
So that's why I would say the 1% that have figured out how to find a scribe or, a penguin, a random house. I'm like, you keep doing what you're doing. I read those books all the time. I love you but for the rest of us, it's very intimidating. And shouldn't we be about tearing down walls and not building walls? And there's just a lot of walls. And we haven't even gotten to the publishing or the marketing part. It's a lot of mysticism around that. And so, again, we're not the only ones trying to solve it, but I think there's kind of a blue ocean strategy. It's kind of a new segment. So maybe we don't call it books, we call it something else, but it certainly goes back to the name of our company, Chapters, the chapters of your life. Why can't we capture this, oral history of everyone? And again, we're not trying to move the cheese of traditionalists, keep doing it, but hopefully we can find another way to, share wisdom in the world.
It's funny. My father, he's 86, and he tells me the story of when he was 21 or something. He wrote a short story, a science fiction story he was going to send into the newspaper, because this is the London in the 50s, and he never did because he was too chicken, and he ended up tearing it up. And like years later, I'm like, I wish I could have read that.
Oh,
so it sounds like what you've got as a tool is something. It's like, we're going to make it easy to do this, and maybe only if your grandparents or your grandkids read it or something, that still you have cemented something and created a legacy.
Oh, I say that all the time. We do legacy, but it's a category in of itself, and there's some fine companies that do that. The legacy book for grandma, grandpa, or end of life type stories. And my mother-in-law did it, and I didn't even read it. I read a few pages, that after she passed, and then 5 years later, I found it, and I couldn't read it fast enough. Yeah, so just that it exists is kind of the point. I think is important.
Yeah, for sure. So you'd mentioned about the publishing and the marketing side of it. So what do you guys do around that, and where do you see AI sort of affecting those industries?
So I come from the ad agency side, and when I look over that fence, and like I said, we have a lot of partners that do that. That's so we're big fans of the publishers and promoters and publicists, but it reminds me of ad agencies of the 90s and 2000s. It's just a lot of spreadsheets and a lot, I was saw some emails yesterday on a book cover, and I think it was 6 to 8 emails going back and forth on book cover, right? Because a book cover is emotional, and it's, it's kind of the thing. It's a sexy thing, and it's very important. So I don't know how to solve for that 6 or 7 emails and the emotional part. I hope AI doesn't ruin that part, because you still want to have fun when you buy your house and you find the color of the paint and all that. Same with your book cover. So there's still this built-in emotional thing that's not conducive to efficiency that we kind of look at when I'm looking at a business like this. So long story short, I think everything can be improved. It is very clunky and lots of friction and very confusing to publish and market. A lot of, am I going traditional? Am I going hybrid? Amazon, how do I navigate those waters? Printing, hardcover, so all these things, it's like 50 to 100 steps, no matter how you look at it. And I think they'll all gradually be improved, but our focus is, our swim lane is just the manuscript. We look at that all the time and like, oh my goodness, that is, arduous, but someone enterprising will come along and say, hey, there's an easier way to do it. That's kind of my non-answer to like, good luck,
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if you had thoughts on how it was sort of changing things already, because, we are seeing different things being streamlined now, and different ways that authors are starting to find using it, which is a much more comfortable use case for most authors. They don't necessarily want to use it for writing, but they want to use it to help their self-publishing business. And as a self-publisher, you have to do everything. And as you said, there's tons of different steps. And when you become a writer, you don't think of it as like, oh, I'm going to write my book, and then I'm going to do my cover, and then I'm going to write my blurb, and then I'm going to advertise it, and I'm going to market it, and I'm going to create email lists, and I'm going to, nobody thinks about all that. They think I'm going to write a book, and then and I can do that now because self-publishing is so much easier, but they don't realize coming into it all that other stuff that they have to do, right? Which is one of the biggest headaches for most self-published authors. That's not why they got into it, and that part of it is not the fun part for them, right? So using AI to help with a lot of those tasks is sort of a lot more palatable for a lot of authors. So
yeah, I think there's, as you probably see in the news right now, and here, the big buzz term is AI agents. And this is more of a gut anecdotal thing, but we're about to just fasten your seatbelt. We're going to see a lot of changes in the next couple of years. And that's about all I'll say, because I don't want to sound like people that predict, but I cannot, even me, I've been really deep in this for a couple of years now. The last 60 days, the last 48 hours, like, oh my goodness, this is coming quick. And to be Pollyanna, I think there'll be some winners here to where you can share your wisdom and get your thoughts out, and there'll be an audience, and it'll just be easier. And, I know there's heartburn with Amazon, but Amazon's in the for-profit business, and I'm sure they have people trying to remove friction, and they want to make money. So, there's people that'll work on it, strange bedfellows that are probably going to come together and try to make it easier to publish and market a book. But there's going to be a lot of changes for sure.
Well, it's so interesting. We're kind of like at this weird cusp of the situation now where a lot of the stuff that's AI is Drek, and Amazon's kind of like pushing against that. But you're right, there is going to be this synchronization where the things that AI allows you to do and the books that Amazon wants to sell and that people want to pay money for and read kind of are in alignment. Yeah.
And their AI standards on, again, we're using AI in a couple of different ways here, because AI everyone's using it now for marketing, and, everyone's playing anything, spreadsheets and, anything that kind of the execution, but the actual writing, Amazon hasn't changed their rules, if that's the right term, in over a year. So they have AI assist and AI something. So, they were pretty black and white, as they should be on, hey, this isn't plagiarism. I'm kind of surprised they haven't said anything in a year, because that's like 10 years in normal time, because the space. So I don't know. I don't know. That's why we're focused on authenticity, because I just think it's going to be unmanageable. It'll be AI versus AI, and there's no way to tell plagiarism. And that's where I think just a capitalist society, if it's good, it's good, and if it's bad, it's bad. And
Yeah, I mean, so Amazon has on their KDP dashboard, when you upload the book, they ask you whether or not the book includes AI content, and they're mainly talking about whether it was written by AI or the cover was generated by AI. They want you to disclose that, and right now they're not necessarily doing anything with that information. I don't remember if they've officially said why they captured or not, but regardless, my personal belief is that they want to have a very quick and easy way to identify all the AI generated stuff in case some of those court cases cause an issue, right? So that they can just click a button and pull all that stuff at once.
Yeah. But you're that's smart. That's an interesting way I think you're exactly right. I guess I'm saying that language that you're looking at, as far as just me researching it, and I look at it often, actually, that's the same language they had a year ago. So I just thought, I'm kind of curious if they had to toggle that, they're just being very careful.
So the thing about Amazon is that they've always done this, they leave everything intentionally vague, because they want to be able to apply the rules as they see fit, and they don't want to be constrained by a very, very specific rule, because then the bad actors find a way around that rule, and then they say, well, I'm not breaking the rule as you laid it out. So they love to keep their rules very, very vague, and then apply punishments as they see fit, and then be able to say, well, you broke the rule, and you're like, but that's not really what it says. And it's like, but it doesn't say it. It does not say that. It's very, very vague. So they do that on purpose. It doesn't surprise me that they haven't really updated, because if they want, as soon as they put a stake in the ground and say, this is our position on something, people look for ways around it, and there's so many people trying to game the system, right? But I agree, the AI agents is the next big thing. Absolutely. I think before this year is out, it will be everywhere. All of the major players have their versions now. I mean, ChatGPT was surprisingly one of the last. They just last week came out with Operator, but Gemini is building it into things, and Claude's had it since October of last year, and their API is still in beta. But they're all building it out, and it's not great yet from the reviews that I've seen. It's still it's slow. It's this, it's that, but it'll get better, as we've seen the breakneck pace of AI and how fast everyone's iterating through stuff. And that DeepSeek that's coming out of China now, that they say is better than all the others, and uses like a tenth of the power, and it's
I mean, you geek out on this, I geek out, but the rest of the world is just painting, whatever they're doing, and to earn a living, but when you see that, or I see that, it's like, oh my goodness, this is, like I said 3 years ago, this is going to be something. I don't know what it's going to be, but I look at the AI agents. One area that manifests itself is in customer service, right? Just when you go to a website, the chat bots are going to kind of, but I'll give you a real world, and maybe I'm boring you with this, but it's just us. So we still use Excel to manage our authors, right? And it's very detailed, and the goal was, okay, now we're going to go to Monday.com or one of the project management software companies eventually, and kumbaya. Now I don't even know if we're going to need that 6 months from now, because we might have the AI agent. We'll just tell Excel to create our own Monday.com, and it'll reconfigure all that data. And that might not be a big deal to you, but I was like, wow, that is going to change software, SaaS.
Yeah. I think, the authors are going to be able to take advantage of it in so many ways. Like for me, what excites me is the idea of, for example, having an AI agent that can manage my Facebook ad campaigns, right? It's a mess right now. It's so complicated. You have to watch it all the time, or it's going to just spend all your money and get results. If you it's very hard to hire somebody profitably for an author who's making very little per sale. It's one thing if you're selling some massive product that's very expensive, you can hire an agency to run your ad campaign. But for an author who is, the profit margin between, being in the red and the black, it's very, very slim, right? So you can't really be, most authors are not going to be not going to be able to profitably have somebody run their campaigns, which means it's another thing you've got to do. And it's not an easy thing. It's not like something you can learn quickly, write a nice blurb or whatever, right? So having an AI agent that could run your campaign, that could be watching it, understands your type of book and your goals and can adjust on the fly and learn. Those kind of tasks. It excites me to have an AI agent do all that. And once that sort of thing comes in, we're going to see some really interesting changes in the industry, I think.
Yeah,
people that take advantage of that early are going to have an advantage over those that sit back on the sidelines. And that's why I'm always sort of evangelizing to authors not to sit on the sidelines for AI, because it's really, it's at one point when it first came out, it was one thing, right? And there wasn't all these great use cases, and everyone's more concerned about if it's going to be writing for it. But we can't worry about that. It's how can it help your business and your process be faster, more efficient, and better. And if every other author or a bunch of other authors are using these things and it's helping them and growing them, and you're not, you're gonna be at a big disadvantage, right? So it's important for us to keep on top of this and to know what's happening in this industry, which is why I like to talk to people like you who are building out things and understand it, and they can bring us a different perspective so that, as authors, we can see what's out there, figure out what's right for us, what we agree with or don't agree with. There's always going to be that. There's lots of authors who still really don't, they just still are against it. And that's okay.
There's no one's a bigger cheerleader than I am for them, because they've got, you keep being you and keep sharing your wisdom.
But I think it's important that they understand just that they don't just dismiss it out of hand because they are, morally think that AI is wrong and whatever. I just want authors to understand what they're giving up and what the implications are, and really have an idea of why they're objecting. It's one thing to say you're objecting because it shouldn't be writing blah blah blah, but are you really objecting to it, running your Facebook ad campaign or giving you advice on how to do a certain task? I use it to, when I have to learn a new software program and I don't really understand it, I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll ask it to explain it, and it's so much faster than if I have to go watch, YouTube videos of somebody teaching me, and it can very specifically answer my question. So just dismissing it out of hand because you don't agree with this one aspect of it, I think is one of the.
And I think a quick test I mentioned earlier, early on, is just the gap analysis. Give a chapter to something, to one of the languages. Say, am I missing anything? Am I inconsistent? Did I repeat myself?
Yep.
I mean, you have to pay an editor to fix that eventually, or someone, or you're gonna, give the reader a bad user experience. So I think that's a baby step to just test it out, and otherwise, keep doing what you're doing, and keep sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, for sure. And I think seeing ideas like this isn't something, what you guys are doing is something that I haven't really seen before, and it's an interesting sort of bridging the gap between the idea of having AI write your book, or having ghostwriters, or having or doing it yourself. Like you're sort of combining all of these things together, and you're really sort of taking out a lot of the downside of using AI, and you're using sort of like what it's good at, processing information, collating information, summarizing things that you're giving it, as opposed to just being creative and pulling things out of its ass.
Well, on your podcast, if you have 50 episodes and you did a 50 chapter, 600 word per chapter, 700 word lessons from Dan and Mary, and you were able to put it in a large language model, organize it, have a good editor. You wrote the foreword. I don't know, bring some knowledge to the world. Do that. I don't, that's controversial, I guess, but it's seems like it's a good use of technology to repurpose your podcast content.
Yes. Well, we are unfortunately reaching the top of the hour, but that actually seems like a very appropriate place to kind of wrap things up. So, Craig, before you ask Dan where people can find out more about Chapter.io and more about him, do you have any final questions?
No, I mean, listen, this has been a really great discussion about some of the stuff that AI can do in different ways than what we've traditionally talked about in the past, or what I've even traditionally seen other companies doing. And while this, specific case that, that Dan's doing with Chapter.io for authors that, for people that have not written books yet, aren't necessarily applicable to sort of the people that listen to this podcast, which are already writers. What it is applicable for is the idea of, thinking outside the box of what AI can do for you and all these other things that it can do. And is showing authors that, it can still do all these things and not really be stealing their words or doing anything that they should really be objecting to too much. I think that's always the thing, is like a lot of people are very siloed in what they think that AI can do. And if they think that that specific case is something that they are not interested in, then they disregard the entire topic. And the more that we can show different examples of what AI can do, the more people start thinking about it in their own heads and thinking outside the box, and then realizing, oh, actually there is a case that I can use this for, and that will make it easier and better for them. So I always appreciate having these different perspectives on AI. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Grateful. Thank you.
So, Dan, where can people who are interested in this find out more about Chapter.io and the services that you offer?
Yeah, so it's chapters.io is the website. My email is dan@chapters.io. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I really love wrestling and talking about the context of all these topics we've wrestled with today. So if anyone has a unique perspective, you don't have to buy a manuscript from us, or utilize this. I'd love to, chat. So I'm very, very grateful and always learning myself. So thank you again.
Oh, well, thank you. This has been a really, really fascinating topic and kind of eye-opening. It challenges some of my preconceptions and thoughts about AI. So we will make sure to pop a link to Chapters.io down in the description of the video. So if you are interested in what Dan has to say, then please scroll down there, click on that link, and go and check Chapters.io out. And while you're down there, there's a big empty comment box. Why don't you leave Dan a comment or leave us a comment and talk about your thoughts about AI and writing and fiction and non-fiction, and where you think it's going to go and what you think is going to go and happen. Just go wild in those comments. We always love to read them. There's also that subscribe button down there if you haven't subscribed already. The like button, give that a smash, as the YouTubers say. And finally, there's a little bell icon which you can tap to get notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked. And of course, there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked coming out next week. So until then, cheerio.